here's another episode of my blog, and it's called My Big Fat Gypsy Squatters. Yeah, Eric, you can say what you like about this community, but they're fantastic animal trainers. They've taught all their dogs to wipe their arses on bread wrappers and newspapers. That was my way of breaking it to him that it was actually human waste. We'd just successfully negotiated with Esso to buy the disused petrol station next door to our garage. Vauxhall had been on our case to expand or to look for another agency for ages, and we thought this would pacify them for a while. I must point out that we had no intention of expanding or taking on more staff, and our zone manager was a half-wit. My boss had refused to attend any more meetings with him, and at the last one he'd thrown his keys on the table and told him to lock up when he'd finished yapping. I was getting to feel the same, as if he'd got his calculator out one more time to tell me how to sell cars, he would have been walking funny for the rest of his life. The Esso station had been boarded up, and each of the entrance and exits had 3 girders concreted in to deny access to anyone except the people who I had just seen drive across the pavement and were setting up camp there. I was renovating an Opel GT, and it was a Sunday. I was on my own at the garage, and I was just having a brew at the front when, to my dismay, I saw all these vehicles coming up the road in convoy, and I watched in horror as transit van after pickup after caravan drove across the pavement. Within minutes, the petrol station forecourt was full. I rang the police, but as usual, they were as much use as a chocolate fireguard and refused to come. They said that it was a civil matter and they could only attend if there was a breach of the peace. I marched next door and I asked to speak to their leader. I politely asked him to get his clan together and move on. It's a long time ago, but I can remember being there. I was at the side of the caravan. He was in the caravan. He was looking down on me and he laughed at me and he said, "There's nothing you can do. We will leave when we want to." And he was right. There was nothing we could do as we hadn't signed the contract yet. It was actually Esso's problem, which was very, very fortunate because in the end, the process was to cost a fortune. Their barrister served all sorts of notices to the courts to try and evict them. It must have cost them thousands of pounds, but nothing they did seemed to work. It was going to be a long, drawn out and very expensive process. I was getting madder and madder as the days went by. It was costing us a fortune. Things were disappearing from our used car stock. Wheel trims, alloys, batteries, radios, all our security lighting and dummy CCTV cameras had been smashed. Our heating had stopped working, and when I investigated, our newly filled 250-gallon tank of red diesel heating fuel was empty. What made it worse, we ordered another delivery of diesel, and they'd also stolen the copper pipe which delivered the fuel from the tank to the burner. So the diesel started pouring out onto the ground. It was also that week that our half-wit zone manager had chosen to pay us a visit. My boss wouldn't talk to him anymore, so I got the short straw and I had to take the meeting. He was giving me a particularly hard time when my phone started ringing. I knew if it wasn't answered within 5 rings, he'd start on about that too. So I picked it up. "Can I speak to Raymond O'Shaughnessy, please?" said the guy with the Irish accent. "I'm sorry, sir. There's no one here of that name," I said politely. "I know, he's at the camp next door," the caller replied, which tripped psycho mode. "No, you can't speak to him, but what you can do is go and fuck yourself," I shouted down the phone. "Okay, well, would you give him a message? Tell him that me and the rest of the lads will be there tomorrow." Before I slammed the phone down and then made sure it was disconnected with about another 5 equally hard slams, I shouted, "Over my dead body." I could tell by Arzoni's face that he was thinking that my telephone manner left a lot to be desired, and he was no doubt making a mental note to put me on a telephone etiquette refresher course. The call couldn't have come at a worse time, and my reaction was fueled by years of crossing swords with this community in the motor trade. But now I had time to think I was sure that I'd detected a slight alteration of the caller's accent and that I could hear people sniggering like children in the background. I'd been the victim of a practical joke. It was Mal from the garage up the road making a wind-up call, and I'd fallen for it hook, line and sinker. Still smarting from my meeting, I went to get some fresh air. Our garage was at the top of a very steep hill. I heard the sound of wheels locking up, and I turned my head to see a dog from the gypsy camp had run into the road, and I watched in horror as it disappeared under a lorry. I won't go into too much detail, but it was a sight that still haunts me to this day. I was sickened. I love dogs. Everybody at the garage loved dogs, all animal lovers. But this community, obviously not so much. They just left the dog and we had to remove its corpse and clean the road. This was the last straw for me. It was now breach of the peace time. I marched straight to the leader's caravan and I banged on his door. Without giving him a chance to speak, I shouted to him, "Remember when you said you'd leave when you wanted? Well, I've got a news flash for you. You'll leave when I fucking say you will. I have a JCB coming at 9 AM tomorrow morning. I'm going to dig a trench around the place. You won't be getting on or off this place anytime soon. And I'll let you go when I feel like it." I was pretty mad when I confronted him. And although it was a bluff at the time, I think their leader knew that now it was war. It may just have been a coincidence, but by 9 AM the next morning, they'd all upped and gone. The SO station was a disgusting mess. My boss and I wandered next door to examine the extent of the mess and damage they'd left in their wake. As we approached the station, we were met by an overwhelming stench. Behind the building, there was a pile of waste. My boss had covered his face with his jacket and I had my hands clasped over mine. My boss shouted to me that he'd never seen so much dog shit in his life. Sarcastically, I replied, "Yeah, Eric, you can say what you like about this community, but they're fantastic animal trainers. They've taught all their dogs to wipe their arses on bread wrappers and newspapers." That was my way of breaking it to him that it was actually human waste. They'd also left 3 live dogs locked up in a scrap car. My boss's wife, who treated me like a son, was a big animal lover, and she paid the kennel and the vet's bills for the dogs until new caring homes were found for them. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Bye bye.